latest pro wrestling news and results and Papa Wrestling! Friends, baby! Locked and loaded, ready to go! It's Versus on a Friday. This is going to be our new Friday normal rant each and every Friday. Right here on Wrestling Rant versus Impact versus Ring of Honor, at least for the next probably month or so. We're going to be continuing to do this weekly look on the Thursday night head-to-head wars between Impact and Ring of Honor. Things have changed a little bit with the content, but right now how we have it is basically each show has exactly an hour and a half of content when you take all the commercials off. So because of that, we are going to be doing a look at the head-to-head battle with 6 15-minute segments instead of the usual 8 segments that we were doing before, which would illustrate 15-minute segments for a 2-hour broadcast. We're just taking all the hubbub out of it. We're going to stick just straight to the content, hour and a half of each show. And thus we do head-to-head battles for basically quarter-hour segments still, just a few less overall because we take all the commercials and everything out of it. So that's kind of how things have changed a little bit with Versus. 6 quarter-hour segments instead of the usual 8 because Ring of Honor now has settled pretty well into an hour and a half of content, and without the commercials, Impact is always about the same, about an hour and a half total. So before we get into the head-to-head battle on Thursday nights, Impact versus Ring of Honor, let's just do a little bit of news and announcements. First and foremost, I want to talk about just a small little thing of note that a clip from one of the matches, or the match with Trinity and Kylan King from the Impact shows I went to over the weekend. I was contacted by TMZ Sports to use some clips from that match. So, in fact, they did indeed use some of those clips from that match from this channel on TMZ Sports just a few days ago. So that was kind of a cool little nugget of information that happened this week, and I was really excited to be able to kind of promote my site a little bit on a national level with TMZ Sports on FS1. So that was kind of cool. I don't know if anybody watched that, but if you did, you probably saw Red Jed's Wrestling Rants right there, front and center, giving credit for the videos that were dropped. As far as it went with it was a segment on Trinity where she was being interviewed and things like that, and they included it as part of it. So very, very cool. Another thing to note, what we got coming up here. This week's been a little rough to get daily content dropped, but my plan of action is to be dropping daily content this weekend. We're going to be doing each and every weekend a little bit of a different variation from my original plans. What we're going to be doing is every Saturday we will be having Laying the Rant Down. That is the weekly look back at industry news, some of the latest kind of industry news to come down the pipeline for the week. That'll be every Saturday now. That was originally, in a lot of cases, done on a Friday. But this is, Versus is going to stick on Fridays for the foreseeable future with the Ring of Honor versus Impact battle. On Sundays will be one of two things. If there's a pay-per-view on Saturday nights, which tends to be happening more often than not, including this weekend's with WWE Backlash, we will be doing a mega rant on Sunday night or into maybe Monday, possibly, but more likely on Sundays. Now, if a pay-per-view is on a Sunday night, we will be moving Mega Rant to the usual spot on Mega Rant Mondays. Just a note on that the Mega Rant are usually pay-per-view reviews in great detail with a lot of information on the attendance and all that kind of jazz. Any back behind the scenes news, etc. Typically will be on Mondays, but when there are pay-per-views Saturday night, They will be dropped hopefully on Sundays. Sundays typically will also be, and this will be regardless of pay-per-view or not, on a Saturday. But Sundays we're going to do a double shot of laying the rant down. I think there's enough stuff going in the world of wrestling where we could get away with doing not one, but two laying the rant down, industry news, opinion rants, etc. on the weekends, on both Saturday and Sunday. So just a bit of a variation of plans of schedules, laying the rant down, now exclusively on the weekends, of both Saturday and Sunday, so two separate rants on two separate subjects, laying the rant down on both Saturday, Sunday. Mega rants will be either on Sunday, depending if the pay-per-view is on Saturday. The very latest, you'll always expect them to be on Mondays at the very latest, right here at Wrestling Rants. Then we move on to our regular content during the rest of the week. Tuesday is Top 10 Takes. That'll normally be on Tuesday. Wednesday is that midweek must-see matchups, which we haven't done in a while, but we're going to keep going back onto that and return with that this coming Wednesday night after Dynamite. Feel free to pop over right here on YouTube to Wrestling Rants and find out all the best matches of the past week. That's part of midweek matchups. Then Thursday is Ranch Respective. There can be a lot of ideas I have with this down the road. One includes a watch-along of a classic wrestling show from the past that myself and maybe other special guests may join in on. Ranch Respective for the time being is going to be a lot of, at least for this month, a lot of video drops from different wrestling events in my past on Thursdays. Also dropping will be extra additional content later in the evening on Thursdays from the Impact tapings in Chicago. I have intentionally left off some videos until after Impact airs as to not spoil much of anything happening on the show. So there will be additional videos from the weekend in Chicago dropped literally every Thursday night for the month right here, Wrestling Rants. A few were released last night after the show, including more of the Trinity segment, including the promo stuff with Deonna Purrazzo and Jordan Grace. There also was the finish from the Jonathan Gresham and Mike Bailey match, which was a great match. Rewatching again live on TV last night, or not so live, I should say, on TV last night, taped from the weekend. By the way, if anybody saw Impact, you may have seen an unmasked Red Jed front row right in front of the cameras wearing that Jericho Crew show. It was, quite frankly, on that television program a lot, and it's going to keep continuing. So I had the same exact seat both Saturday and Friday night last week, and that means I'm front and center ringside on every one of the Impact episodes this month. So, now that we've got the housekeeping out of the way, let's talk about these shows. Let's talk about Impact first. Impact was the first week from Chicago that was taped last Friday. As I've said ad nauseum, I was at the show. You've seen all the videos right here. You hopefully checked out the mega rant that I did. That dropped, I think, on Tuesday of this week. Talk about everything that happened over the weekend. And as I said, the first week aired last night on Access TV. Not a whole lot of extra stuff to talk about beyond what I've already discussed from the spoilers. So we'll get into it in a second from a breakdown of quarter-hour segments, 15 minutes each. Ring of Honor had an interesting lineup on paper. Some of the matches I expected to be really awesome. Quite frankly, were kind of disappointing. And some matches also surprised me on how good they were when I really wasn't expecting them to be. Another thing with Ring of Honor that kind of surprised me was as the show went on, kind of less interest in the show as it went on by my eyes. I felt like there was some stuff that was momentum-wise starting to go on the opposite direction as the show progressed. They kind of peaked about maybe, I would say about halfway through the show, and then that second half of the show just kind of a little bit. So let's get into it. Let's not waste any more time. the jibber jabbing, let's get into verses from the 4th of May for Impact and Ring of Honor on a Thursday night. So Impact's first segment was the actual opening match on the tapings on Friday as well. So they did basically go in order, FYI, on these first week taping, at least so far. And the first match was Brian Myers and Moose over Yuya Uemura and Bhupinder Gujjar. You know, it was all right. It felt a little flat, especially for an opening match, especially being there live. It was kind of flat being there live. Moose got the win with a spear over Gujjar in the finish. Also in this segment, Steve Macklin was in the back with Champagne Singh and Mahabali Shera. They were setting up a 6-man later on against PCO and 2 mystery opponents. And also, Dirty Dango was on the investigation of what exactly was going on with the attack on Santino Marella by a mystery person. So he is now wearing his detective hat. This was kind of a zany, wacky, goofy segment with Joe Hendry. There was they had a bunch of stuff on a board, like potential suspects. A couple of them really popped up of note. One was Vladimir Kozlov, who just did an appearance in the Vegas tapings. And also Tyler Breeze. They showed a picture of Tyler Breeze. And Dirty Dango even made a point to say that Joe Hendry is his best bud now and all this kind of stuff. While at the same time, there was a picture of Tyler Breeze right behind Dirty Dango. So I'm wondering if maybe Tyler Breeze is going to be brought into Impact, and maybe if he's going to be behind this attack on Santino Marella. I guess time will tell. We'll wait and see on that. Over on Ring of Honor and competition on that first quarter hour segment for that first hour, Rocky Romero went over Lee Moriarty in quite a good match, a very solid match. They gave it time. I was impressed. I liked the work. So I went for that first quarter hour in this head-to-head battle, Ring of Honor. Let's go into the second quarter hour of both shows. Impact had Sami Callihan over Khan or Big Khan or Connor of the Design, however you want to call him. Match was very weak. I remember being very unimpressed with this one live as well. It was just slow. It was plodding. The one standout point of the match was Connor's Vader-like punch sequence. I thought that was all right, but there really wasn't much to say with this match. Callihan went over after the match. He got attacked by a litany of recruits for the Design in yellow hoodies. That video also got dropped, so you can see that in Wrestling Raps now if you're wondering what that was all about. That just got released last night. Another segment in this quarter hour was Dirty Dango accosting Trey Miguel. They thought he had something to do with it, but basically they kind of took care of the fact that it appeared Trey Miguel had nothing to do with the situation with Santino Marella after all. Over on Ring of Honor, we had a couple matches actually, surprisingly, in a quarter hour segment. I thought maybe perhaps they would, particularly in one of these matches, give it more time. Athena went over Angelica Risk, a Proving Ground match, which is more or less a squash. And then we also had, this went over in a little bit into the next quarter hour segment, Samoa Joe defending the World Television Championship against Fallen Angel Christopher Daniels. These guys have a shit ton of history, not just in Ring of Honor, but in other promotions, including Impact, ironically enough. And this match just didn't have much meat to the bone, unfortunately. Joe went over Daniels very convincingly in a 6-minute match or something like that. I was real shocked this match didn't get much more time than this. As it were, because the Callihan match was so very weak, I went with, once again, Ring of Honor getting the nod on this quarter hour for the Athena match, as well as the Joe Daniels match. Quarter hour 3, this would be after about a half hour into the show. We move into quarter hour 3. On Impact, we got Nick Aldis with an interview with Jimmy Jacobs in the back, talking about what the details behind him coming back to Impact, what his intentions are, what he's looking forward to do. Kenny King interrupted him. That's starting off this program with King and Aldis, which appears to be probably set up for Under Siege. They got into it a little bit verbally in this segment. Jody Threat also had a match over Alicia Edwards that was quite quick. It was more or less a squash. The Motor City Machine Guns did an interview where they talked about Sabin challenging Trey Miguel for the X Division Championship Under Siege, and also that Alex Shelley is going to go his own separate direction to try to challenge for the World Championship. So that may be a match we'll see down the road as Alex Shelley and Macklin, perhaps, for the Impact Championship. They also had Kazarian in a retrospective part 2 here this week, and this was just as good as the first part. He was looking back at his run in AEW and things like that in this segment. Over on Ring of Honor, we had a Ring of Honor World Championship match between Claudio Castagnoli and New Japan Pro Wrestling Robbie Eagles. This was probably the best part of Ring of Honor for this week. I thought they gave it a decent amount of time. It flowed well. These two matched up really well together. So definitely gave the nod for Ring of Honor for this quarter hour as well. So far, 3 to a big old goose egg. Ring of Honor ahead. Also in this segment, Sky Blue did an interview where it appears that she will be challenging and having a match with Athena for the Ring of Honor Women's Championship coming up. Get into quarter hour 4. Impact had a 6-man. This was PCO and Mystery Partners Rhino and Heath against Steve Macklin, Champagne Singh, and Mahabali Shera. It was okay. It was alright. The match was kind of just there and more as a springboard to set up Rhino and Macklin the following week. Or actually, it probably will be in 2 weeks from now if I'm doing the timeline right on Impact Programming. Match, like I said, was alright. Finish was PCO doing the PCO assault on Champagne Singh for the win. The Coven did a vignette suggesting that they were putting some sort of spell, maybe on Rosemary. Something was going on there for sure. And then they also did a segment with Rosemary and Jessica and Father James Mitchell. So, as the story goes, Rosemary is still looking for Taya Valkyrie, who actually left the company, and to do that, she has to go back into the dark side to find her. Enter Father James Mitchell, who said he will lead her into the dark side, and off they went into some hallucinatory doorway, and yada yada yada. So I guess that explains why Rosemary disappears in storyline, and why, spoiler, just as a heads up, why Courtney Rush, the former persona of Rosemary, shows up weeks from now on Impact Programming to make the save for Jessica. Presumably she returns from the dark side and she's back in a different gimmick, similar to Jessica Havoc, becoming Jessica from Havoc, basically, to put it in a nutshell. Over on Ring of Honor, we had a couple matches in this quarter hour. From this point on, all the matches on Ring of Honor were quite short, quite to the point. That's for sure. We actually had a 10-man tag. Action Andretti, Darius Martin, Stu Grayson, and the Best Friends of Trent, and the Kentucky Gentleman, Chuck Taylor, against the Varsity Athletes and the Kingdom. Andretti got the win over Daivari, I believe, for the finish. One background thing with this match was that the Righteous came out and were apparently accosting and trying to recruit Stu Grayson in some level. There's some sort of psychological thing going on between Grayson and the Righteous, so apparently he'll probably be joining them, I would assume, at some point here coming up soon. Also, they kind of squeezed in a quick squash with Preston Vance against Rich Adonis in this segment as well. I gotta go with Impact for this quarter hour segment. I think the 6-man was better than the 10-man, and I also think that squash was just there on Ring of Honor, and I kind of sort of in a I don't know, like guilty pleasure way, enjoyed the Rosemary and Father James Mitchell segment and the Coven vignette as well. So that's one for Ring of Honor. We still got, or one for, Impact, and we got 3 for Ring of Honor. Let's go into the final half hour. We got 2 more quarter-hour segments to go. Jonathan Gresham over Speedball Mike Bailey on Impact. Great match. I would probably put this as the second best match on the Impact tapings for both nights last weekend. This was so good. Watching it back, particularly on a replay, there was a spot, as a matter of fact, where they did like basically a Spanish fly, a running Spanish fly in the middle of the ring. And I watched my reaction at ringside front row, and I absolutely marked out. So just had to put that out there. Also, Callahan did a promo with Rich Swann, trying to recruit him to help with design. As we know from the spoilers, that does in fact happen. That Swann and Callahan are kind of joining forces a bit against the design. Over on Ring of Honor, we had the Kingdom attacking Dante Martin in action and Andretti in the back. So that's probably setting up a tag team match with them in the next few weeks on ROH TV. Sky Blue went over Robin Renegade, and Brian Cage went over Brock Anderson in this quarter hour. Once again, I gotta go Impact with that Speedball Mike Bailey, Jonathan Gresham match. Good shit right there, folks. So now we got Ring of Honor 3. We got Impact 2. As we go into this last quarter hour, the main event quarter hours, technically for both shows. It sure didn't feel like that on the Ring of Honor side. On the Impact side, we got Scott D'Amore getting into it with Macklin in the back. They're continuing their quasi-feud, so to speak. And D'Amore announced that Macklin will be taking on Rhino on a future installment of Impact. That appears to be 2 weeks from now on Impact. Then we got the Trinity debut. I thought it came off great. I thought she looked like a star. I thought the crowd was fully engaged, even on TV. I was there live, and I can definitely confirm they definitely were in the crowd, all for Trinity. One of the biggest pops I've ever heard at an Impact show for anybody in this segment. I also like the exchange that Purrazzo and Jordan Grace had with Trinity. I like the idea of a triple threat with those 3 coming on down the road, probably at Slammiversary, I would imagine. So I thought, by all means, an absolute home run of a segment at the end of Impact. Over on Ring of Honor, we had a really lackluster finish, to a degree, on the last quarter-hour segment. Included Willow Nightingale over Stephanie Delander. It was okay, just felt a little flat, and a little rushed, and a little like nothing much of a match to it. And then we also had what was their main event, Commander in there against Angelico, which I had a lot of expectations for, and it was okay, but it just felt borderline like a glorified squash for Commander. After the match, members of the Spanish announce team, I think it is, or Pentaco, etc., they attacked Commander, and that led out Bandito and Orange Cassidy to make the save, and a bit of a surprise. So not sure where exactly they're going with this. Probably a 6-man down the road on Ring of Honor, but just a flat last quarter hour, unfortunately, for ROH. I have to go with Impact getting the win on that last quarter hour with the Trinity debut and everything. That was by far probably the best part of both shows this week, quite frankly. So to tally it all up, we have a dead heat this week between Ring of Honor and Impact. 3-3, 3 quarter hours for Impact and 3 quarter hours for Ring of Honor. Dead ass tie this week, folks. As this part of Impact versus Ring of Honor from May 4th concludes as part of Versus. All right, everybody, keep your eyes glued right here at Wrestling Rants, because tomorrow, laying the rant down, we're going to take a look at industry news. This will probably include some thoughts from me on this Raw World Heavyweight Championship tournament that's a little confusing. There's some interesting news about CM Punk and his role in AEW coming up here as we get closer and closer to his return. I look to be talking about that as well, and maybe another news item of some sort for tomorrow's Laying the Rant Down. Look for that Saturday morning, as I'm going to be leaving Saturday afternoon to do some stuff as well out of town. So All right. Catch y'all later on the weekend, right here. Wrestling